I wrote my first screenplay in 2016, and it was the first draft of a movie that went on to become very successful. It was the most successful movie in Nigeria that year, but I wasn't credited for it. I wasn't paid for it.
Are you able to share the name of the movie?
It's like, are you sure this filming dream can ever happen? I was like, I hope so. It's like, hey, you have to pay your rent. So I had an idea many years ago. Sorry to digress. It was about Fela Kuti. And Fela had gone to LA in 1969, while he was trying to find his musical sound at the start of his career. And while he was there, he met this African-American woman who was a Black Panther, and they fell in love. And in those 3 months, she essentially awakened him politically. And I remember thinking, I would love to write a story about that. And I was like, but imagine if I got to write it with her.
Welcome to episode 4 of Behind the Mind. And in this episode, I have a chat with Jegede, who is a full-time screenwriter. He wrote one of the biggest movies this year, Gangs of Lagos. And I believe his story is going to inspire someone to never give up. That it is never too late to discover your passion and monetize your passion so that you can live your life getting paid to do what you were born to do and not getting paid for doing what you are forced to do. Subscribe and like to support the growth of this channel. Enjoy this episode. And I wanted to talk to you today because I think your story is one that will inspire people to believe that it's never too late to discover your passion, to convert your passion into a skill, and to monetize your passion. Because growing up, like we're told, what you love to do won't pay the bills.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of people traded their passion for bread.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, they get to their 30s and 40s and they start feeling the regret of what if. Like, what if I had stuck with my passion? What would my life look like if I just stuck with that thing that I love to do? Not realizing, and I saw this on Instagram the other day, that Christian Dior started Dior at 41.
Wow.
Walmart started at 44. GoDaddy 47. Adidas 48. Henry Ford 49. Home Depot 49. KFC 62. So I'm hoping that this episode helps to shift someone's mindset that, you know what, I'm not too old to start. Right?
Yeah.
And so before we dive into your story, I want to ask this question, how long have you been writing professionally? Yeah. And what would you say has been the highlight of your writing career so far? Like a moment that made you feel like, man, this is a dream come true. I know you're still writing your story, but as of right now.
Oh man, that's, I'll get to the second part in a bit. That's a bit of a complex answer for me right now because everything is sort of happening. But I started writing professionally in 2016. So I wrote my first screenplay in 2016, and it was the first draft of a movie that went on to become very successful. It was the most successful movie in Nigeria that year, but I wasn't credited for it. I wasn't paid for it.
Are you able to share the name of the movie?
No, I'll share it offline. So I was uncredited for that. So I guess in a way, that was when I became a professional screenwriter because the film went on to do really well, etc. in Nigeria. I was in public infrastructure at the time. Ended up moving back to England and then to the Netherlands to do tech infrastructure, and then went full time into writing at the end of 2021. Quit my job and said, you know what, I'm gonna go do this thing full time. So I guess I've only been full time for less than 2 years. Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's crazy.
So you're actually full-time writer?
Oh, yeah. I'm a full-time screenwriter, yeah.
Oh, my. Okay. So what has been the highlights of your career so far?
So a film that I wrote 2 years ago, Gangs of Lagos, came out in April 2023, went on to do sort of, incredible numbers. It was mind-blowing, not just for the streamer, but for us as well. I think we were writing the film or talking about the film and thinking that this could be something that people around the world could connect to globally, something that could travel, even though it sits in the very specific area of Nigeria and of Lagos. And most of the film is in Yoruba. But then, the film, was top 10 in 65 countries, I think. And I mean everywhere from the UK to the US to Canada to Australia to Kazakhstan. It was number 1 in Ukraine, and they're in the middle of the war. Yeah, and there's 80% in Yoruba. So that has been incredible, and it was named one of the top 10 best performing non-English titles in the history of Amazon Prime.
Wow.
Yeah. It's published in Variety. Yeah, you should check it out. Check out the article. So that has been incredible, not just because of the reception to the film, but because it sort of proved this idea that, I've always had, that the issue that we have isn't that people don't understand our stories, is that maybe we're not presenting good enough stories in terms of structure yet. So, the world now is really, really comfortable with watching things in subtitles. In fact, people watch most of the shows and series and films that they like in subtitles, whether it's Korean, Spanish, whatever it is. Yeah, exactly. Squid Game. So, and Parasite and all these other films. So that really sort of proved this notion that I had in my head. Every time gatekeepers said, people won't really get stories from this part of the world, blah, blah, blah. So that was big for me. On the back of that, I got my agent, and I mean, I'm sitting in rooms with people now, man, honestly, and my mind is blown. Like, sometimes I come out of the meeting, I have to be like, wait, who was that? Do you know what I'm saying? And they're saying, we're fans of your work, we love your work, blah, blah, blah. So that so far has been really cool. But I think the highlight for me would be sort of some of the stuff that's coming, some of the things that we've signed, people that we've signed with. I have a TV series with Paramount that's coming out next year, in the States, Paramount/BET Plus. I have a multiple project deal with Amazon Studios as well.
Like, how do you do this though? Like,
I know, it's crazy.
Okay,
it's crazy.
So we'll get back to Gangs of Lagos in a bit, but I feel like let's dive into your story back to the beginning, like, because I found that a lot of people don't recognize the gifts that they have because it comes too naturally for them. We tend to ignore the things that come easy because we believe that if something has value, it must be hard. And so, when was the moment that you recognized that you had a passion for writing, where you realized that you were, like, this wasn't just a gift, like, this was something that you were born to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've always written. In primary school, secondary school, all of that, I was really, really good at writing, spelling, literature, just stuff like that. And I remember in Nigeria, in secondary school, I would get I wouldn't get the highest grade because the teachers thought I had plagiarized the work. Yeah, and that happened to me. And then I went to year 11 in England, and that happened again. I did, my year 11 coursework, and the teacher said, in her comments, she said, yeah, this is really good, but it's clearly been, heavily borrowed from a published writer.
Wow.
Yeah, but because I had sort of experienced that before, it wasn't really a big deal to me. And I was, talking to my dad about it. My dad was like, why would they say that? That's wrong, blah, blah, blah. I was just used to it. So for me, it was like normal. I was like, yeah, they never believe it's my work. So I always sort of loved writing. I enjoyed writing. When I was 16, I really wanted to write a novel, but I guess I just didn't know how. So I wrote, a few pages and I just, left it. After that, I just went through life, wanting to be, a professional in whatever industry I was going to end up in. And then when I was doing my master's, I stumbled across a blog, and I thought the writer was funny. I thought the stories were just really cool. And he had moved back to Nigeria, and he was like an older guy, like compared to me, he was like maybe like 10 years older, and he was working in Nigeria, telling stories about where he worked and stuff like that. And that was my first time actually reading a blog, period. And I thought, wow, I could do this. So I started a blog that day and just started telling stories. It was just like a diary about, myself and my friends. And in about a week, it had sort of blown up across the sort of Niger blog readers ecosystem, and it became very, very popular. And I think the moment that I started to think maybe I should do this professionally was I got an email from my favorite novelist, Nigerian novelist, and she was like, bro, I read your blog, you are an incredible writer. Are you writing professionally? Are you writing short stories? Are you trying to get published? Whatever it is that you want to do, I want to help you. And when that happened, I froze because I was like, okay, so what do I do now? So I stayed in touch with her. I did a workshop that she used to run in Nigeria. I got selected to be in that workshop, I think the following year. And then we sort of became cool, but I never did anything with it. And that point that you made earlier is interesting because she said to me, at the end of the workshop, she said, writers like you generally don't make it. And I'm not trying to say that in a rude way. I'm not trying to discourage you, but it comes too naturally to you. You don't spend hours and hours working on this thing and working on the craft, because you sit there overnight, you write a story and everyone loves the story. So it comes so easily to you that a lot of times guys like you really push as hard as you should. So I guess that was the moment that I thought maybe this is something that I could do professionally. But the truth is, for years and years, I just didn't know how. So I just continued on, my corporate life, and
that is interesting. Obviously, you did the corporate thing for a while. How did that feel? Like, did you feel fulfilled? Like, or did you always feel like there's something missing here? Like, if I spent my entire life on this trajectory, even though I knew that you were a successful business guy back home, it just feels like everything you touch just turns to gold, man. So I'm like, so how did that feel, having to balance the idea that I know I've been built to do this, but I'm stuck doing this for the meantime?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was difficult because when I got into public infrastructure in Nigeria, I loved it. I loved what I did. I loved managing people. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed sort of the speed of the environment. For a long period, I sort of convinced myself that was, what I was meant to be doing, because clearly I was good at this thing. But
did you guys catch that? He convinced himself that his job was what he was supposed to be doing because he was good at it. And I find that this is why a lot of men spend their entire lives climbing the ladder of success only to get to the top and find out that the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. It's because a lot of men are focused on doing good things and not doing the right thing. And if you want to know the difference between a good thing and the right thing, I found this in the Bible the other day, Romans 12, verse 2. It says that be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you may know what is that good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. I find that a lot of us only focus on doing what is good, but we don't take the extra step of figuring out if that good thing is acceptable to God and is in the perfect will of God for our lives. Jesus lived a good life. He did a lot of good things. He healed the sick. He raised the dead. He fed multiple people with meager resources. But if he never went to the cross, he would have died a failure because he focused on doing good things but not doing the right thing. He was born to die. If he never did that, then he would have been considered a failure in heaven. Let's get back to the video.
There was always that niggling thing. There was always that every time I saw a book that somebody wrote, every time I read an article about a new novelist, every time I thought I saw like Chimamanda Adichie, who's the writer I was talking about earlier. Every time I saw her, have like a book signing, in my mind, I just like, I really should be writing. But again, it was just back to that thing of parking it to the side, because I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know. I just did not know how to go and write a novel. But it was always a niggling feeling. And by the time I wrote that script in 2016, I was convinced that, actually I've been doing this whole corporate thing all this time to pay the bills, but I need to parlay this thing into full-time writing. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but this is my dream. This is what I was born to do. And the reason why I always had that feeling was that I never could replicate the sensation that I had when I was writing blogs. So every time I'll write a blog, I'll maybe publish at night and go to sleep. And in the morning, bro, all I wanted to do was just wake up in the morning to go see the responses to the blog. And the feeling of people connecting with characters that, I had created in my head, and people knowing the characters, understanding the characters in and out, predicting the characters' behaviors. That was a drug that I just could not replicate anywhere else. So that always stayed with me, and I knew that this was something that I needed to be doing for sure.
You just mentioned something now about character development. Like, that is something that I've never been able to wrap my head around. Like, you're creating individual stories in your mind. Like, where does your creativity, like, what inspires your creativity and those stories?
Yeah, I'll say everything. So everything inspires me. Everything I've experienced, everything that I'm around, things that I see. I'm also very inspired by where I come from. I think Nigeria is just an incredibly rich place in terms of culture and in terms of characters. I mean, everybody's funny in Nigeria. Even people who are not trying to be funny. If you go to a mechanic's workshop, you listen to the guy telling the story. Everyone is just so charismatic, and and all these stories are just so layered, even like from a thematic perspective. So I'm very, very much inspired by that. I'm also, and this is something that has come up in a lot of sort of the meetings and collaborations that I've had recently and that I'm having, is I feel like I'm at this weird intersection of worlds. I'm Nigerian, but I lived in Nigeria. I was born in London. I moved back to London at 15. Then I went to the States for uni, then back to London for my master's, then lived in Nigeria, worked in the public infrastructure, met all these different kinds of characters, moved back to England. So that sort of perspective can be really, really helpful in inspiring characters, because you just know so many people from so many different worlds, and you relate to all of them differently, and I think that is a large part of what I do. So like, I really like writing crime, and a large part of that is because you look at sort of like the socio-political situation in Nigeria, and how the political intrigues of that, and sort of like the criminal element of that, and I think that's why I really find that whole thing interesting, for sure.
Wow. There was something you just said. So the fact that you've lived in different environments has shaped your perspective, or has given you an advantage, I would say, in how you see the world, because now you're able to connect with different people. It's funny because I was telling my dad, I'm like, when I went to uni, I'm going full transparency, I didn't learn a thing. Like, I just wanted to party. But I told my dad, I'm like, there was one thing that I did get, even though I didn't go for formal education, I did get informal education, right? I got the opportunity to interact with people from different races, something that most people never get the chance to do. So I'm like, you didn't waste your money. But anyway, let's get back to you. There was something you mentioned about how it comes naturally to you. And I feel like a lot of people, that is where they miss it. It's like, talent is never enough. There's a book I'm reading right now, Talent is Never Enough. You need to convert your talent into a skill. And so do you feel like you've been able to bridge the gap? Because like Chimamanda said, this thing comes too naturally to you, and a lot of people don't give it the time and effort that it needs to refine your craft, right? So what has that process been like for you, refining your passion into a skill?
100%. I mean, and again, that's another great question. I did a screenwriting masterclass recently for the African International Film Festival, and talking to the screenwriters, one of the first things I said was, you have to be obsessed with it. If you're not obsessed with it, don't worry about this. Just go do something else. And that is the thing for me, is I'm obsessive about writing. I'm obsessed with it, which means I'm Googling everything, I'm reading everything, I'm making notes about everything, I'm trying to learn everything about it, constantly, continuously, every day. When I wrote that screenplay in 2016, I had never had formal training. I didn't go to film school, I didn't study film, but I literally wrote that script in 3 weeks. I wrote the first draft in 3 weeks, after spending hours and hours and hours on Google, just trying to learn and understand screenplay structure. At the time, I felt like I really got a good grasp of screenplay structure very quickly. I mean, that was years ago. So now I'm looking back and I'm like, no, well, you didn't really have the complete grasp of it. You had an understanding of it, enough to write like the first draft of a script. But now, that, and I think that sometimes is what is missing for a lot of people, is that you're just not obsessed. You like it, but if you're not obsessed with it, and you're not spending every waking moment trying to learn more about this thing, trying to do masterclasses. I watch like lots of masterclasses. I read lots of scripts, and I think that has been the thing for me in terms of honing my craft. Is I've just been on a constant journey of learning every single day, like non-stop. I'm always studying the stuff, because that is the difference. Nobody's going to pay you, and I think that's the other thing. I think sometimes people say, you know what, I've got talent as a writer, so somebody should come and pay me big money to write a script, but they're not going to pay you if you don't understand structure, and if you don't arrive cooked. So a lot of times you want to have meetings, but you're not cooked. So you get there and then you have one shot, and then you miss the jump shot, and then you're like, I thought I had talent. And like you said, it's not enough. You really need to get cooked.
Love that. It's something I've always wanted to ask writers, right? Like, when you watch movies, are you able to turn off your writing brain? Like, are you able to fully just enjoy a movie, or are you always trying to figure out where the writer is going?
Yeah, I mean, I'm able to enjoy it. I'm still able to enjoy it, but I can never turn off my writer's brain. And it's weird because it also affects the people that you're around. So if you're, if you have a partner, you have a family member, they also start to think like you because they talk to you so much. But yeah, films are still fun for me. It's just, I just sort of, I'm looking out for like the structural signposts. And it's weird, but the average person is actually a film expert, even though they don't know it. I learned this when I was studying screenplay structure, because you've seen so many films. You've watched films since you were a child, and so your brain has created this sort of structural tentpoles about when things are supposed to happen. So when you go to watch a film and those things are not happening, something in your brain is telling you this film isn't right, but we don't know that we know this, right? But you do, because you've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of films. And so yeah, I'm the same way. The only difference is I know what those things are, and so I'm paying attention directly to those things. But yeah,
you just said some. I feel like the difference between someone who has natural ability and someone who has the skill is that someone with natural ability doesn't understand the structures that you're talking about, those temples that you're talking about. So in their mind, they're just like, you know what, this is me, like this is my work, this is how I want to flow. But you need to align with certain, what do you call it? Structures that appeal to the mind. You need to understand how people think and how people receive information. So that's the difference between a natural ability and converting it into a skill. I actually like that you brought that up. So I was watching your first short film 2 days ago. Okay. And I watched it with my wife.
Right.
And dude, I'm not even joking, man. I had goosebumps at the end.
Wow.
I don't know if it's because obviously the story, and when I saw your name pop up, something just went off in my head, because I don't know if you remember this, but when we're in nights, like there was a time when TFC chatting, and that was the first time that you told me that, dude, I have this thing about writing, man. I want to take it serious. Wow. And then you relocated, I relocated, and I didn't hear anything. Like we didn't keep in touch, nothing. And all of a sudden, I'm on Instagram and I see Gangs of Lagos written by K. Jegede. I'm like, what? like how? So this guy was actually serious, right? Yeah. So I feel like seeing that story, seeing that moment when you told me, and seeing it come to fruition, and then watching the short film, and I'm like, I always love it when I watch something, I'm like, I never thought about it like that. So for guys watching, it's called I Am Mary. Go and check. It's going to be in the description below. But I want to know, like, where did the inspiration for that short film come from?
Oh yeah, thanks for that, man. And thanks for those words. I kind of remember us being in TFC, but I don't remember the conversation.
Dude, but, I stuck to it, man. I was like, this guy kid is writer. Okay, I'm like, how?
But so I Am Mary was a film that was commissioned by the Sainsbury's Trust, and they, the Sainsbury's family, and they have a charity essentially that they make these faith-based short films. And a guy I know, Femi Oyeniran, he's a film director here in the UK, and he's a friend of mine. He had directed a film called I Am Pilot for the same guys. And when I saw I Am Pilot, I was like, yo, Fems, I can write a short story like this. And I was like, yeah, I'll introduce you to the producers. So it's so funny because the producer now is like one of my best friends. Wow. But yeah, he introduced us, and she basically said, look, we're doing submissions for a story about Mary, and we all know the story of Mary. We don't want you to come and just take the thing from the text from the Bible and just make it into a script. We want something that really humanizes her, and we want a unique perspective. So I went off and I was thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? We always think about people as one-dimensional. So if I describe Muyi as a guy that's a really nice guy, we immediately imagine that Muyi has no flaws because he's a nice guy. He walks down the street, he helps an old lady cross the road, he helps some little kids on the bus. He never falters. He's perfect. But that's not true. Human beings have layers, and that's what makes them human. And I thought about the story about Mary, and I'm like, okay, we all talk about Mary being this pure, gentle, demure virgin, but when were we ever told that she was gentle? We were told that she was righteous and she was chosen and she was a virgin, but when were we told she was gentle, or she was weak, or she always needed help, or she needed protecting. No, nobody said that. Mary was a woman. So when you think about women, the women that you know, what are they like? They're typically strong, right? They're typically strong. They're typically, opinionated. They're typically go-getters. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, what about the other aspects? And I thought about survivor's guilt and all that sort of stuff. And that was how the story came about. It was just making them more human, essentially. Yeah.
That is what got me. I love it when I see people. It's just like The Chosen, like I told you, right?
Yeah.
Like The Chosen, I think, has done big numbers and has got a lot of viewership today because it is taking a story that we grew up knowing or thinking that we knew and showing us the layers, like you said, in each character that we're like, oh my goodness, I never thought about that. We're not going to spoil it because I want people to go watch it. It's going to like, I want that aha moments to be there, right? I feel like so far in your story, it's been rosy. It feels like a clean story, right? So I'm like, have you experienced any hurdles or obstacles to your journey? Like, what would you say has been your biggest setback?
Honestly, like the stuff that we're talking about now is the rosy stuff, because this is all the stuff after. But when you look at what it took to get here, bro, it's been wild. Like I said, I was in public infrastructure in Nigeria. There was a change of government in what was that, 2016, I think, and everything just sort of came crashing down for me. Not necessarily even just professionally, but financially as well. It felt like my world was upside down. It was time to pivot, but I didn't even know how to pivot. I didn't know how to start afresh, and I wasn't really sure about what was next. When I wrote that screenplay in 2016, I was convinced that even though I was going through a lot of like personal turmoil, this script was going to sort of change my life, and it was going to change everything. Well, it didn't. That situation sort of fell apart, and it was one of the worst times of my life. Now you have to remember that script, I wasn't credited for, wasn't paid for. The producer and director went on to get lots of accolades off of that work that I had been a part of. So that was really hard professionally. When I moved to England, I was still trying to write. I spent a lot of time on my own. Just writing scripts, trying to pitch stuff. There were many sort of false starts. There was a project I remember that I thought, I had found a collaborator on, and that sort of fell apart. And so when I went back into the workforce, at first it was difficult because I was like, I know I'm meant to be a writer, but it appears that I'm never going to actually succeed as a writer. Now, remember, I'm in my 30s. I'm in my mid-30s at this point. Anybody who's, hearing me talking about writing is thinking to themselves, this guy is a dreamer. Just focus on your 9 to 5 and sort of piecing your life back together. But, I stayed with it, and it was hard. I remember times when I'll be talking to someone about, a script, and they'll be like, I'll pay you 200,000 naira, I'll pay you 100,000 naira to write a script. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, and it's not even the money, it's the value. You're thinking, is that the value of my work? Is like $100. And I wrote a script called The Dukes of Broad Street, and that is a film that we're actually shooting next year now. And when I wrote that script, it's a crime drama film set in Nigeria. I was really excited by it. I read that script, I was like, this is really dope. I feel like this is really going to go somewhere. I started pitching to different people, and then just before so now I've done a time jump for like maybe 3 years of just grinding, having lots of scripts, I'm just keeping them. I then find an investor who says, and these guys were they were going to invest in that film in 2016. So I sort of brought them back on this, miraculously. They were like, what, like this sounds really interesting, blah, blah, blah. Let's pull the trigger. We'll pull the trigger and you get to make this film. And this was in 2019, at the end of 2019. So I was working at the time actually in the Netherlands. I'd moved to the Netherlands to do tech infrastructure. So I quit my job in November 2019 because I knew that we were about to make this big film. I'd gotten the money for it, or at least that money had been committed. So I was like, okay, we're good now. This thing's about to happen. And then I go to Nigeria in December. The film was going to shoot in Nigeria. We started doing auditions and stuff like that. Long story short, COVID hits. So COVID hits in February. I'm back in the Netherlands. Investors like, yo, I don't know what's going on in the world right now. I'm sorry, I've got to pull out. I just can't. We just can't make any moves right now, knowing the state of the world. Now remember, I've quit my job. I'm back in the Netherlands. It's lockdown, so there's like zero income, right? There's zero income. There's no film. We don't know how long this thing's gonna last. And essentially, I was like, yo, this is crazy. But for some reason, I said, this is not worse than what I went through a few years ago. I'm still here. So I don't know. I don't know how we're going to do this, but we're going to do this. So I spent lockdown writing this romantic drama that I thought we were going to make as with a good friend of mine, that we we're going to make as not a short film, but like a really low budget film about a guy in Europe and a girl in the States who fall in love over Zoom during lockdown. I spent a lot of time on that, and then, really believing that we're going to make that film. The film never got made. Film never got made. So now you can imagine what people are saying to me. They're saying, look, dude, you need to just go back. After the pandemic, just go back to work. Like, this film thing is not going to happen. The world is not
ready for this.
Not ready for this, man. If it happens in the future, it'll happen. But something in me is just like, you know what? I know I was born to do this. It's a matter of time. So sometime after lockdown, Jade hit me up, Jade Oshiberu, whom I had met years prior. And she's like, I want to write this film about these people in Lagos Island. And sorry, before Jade called me, I'd written that short film called I Am Mary. And that was sort of, a light at the end of the tunnel, because right after lockdown, we shot that film. That film came out. People really loved it. That was very encouraging to me because it felt like validation. Remember, the producers had taken lots of submissions, different ideas for the film. And then they called me and said, we saw many, many ideas. Yours came in on the final day of submissions, and it was the best one we've seen. It was the best take that we had seen. So that again gave me, a high level of validation. Like, okay, maybe this is actually possible. And then also, so Jade called me as well shortly after that. I wrote that again to remember. Now I'm back on the up and up in my mind. I'm thinking, maybe this can happen. I went back into full-time work to pay the bills after lockdown, and started collaborating with different people. So that producer who did Mary introduced me to somebody else who wanted someone to write a pilot for a finance drama, that he had. We had one conversation. It was like, yeah, man, I really like it, blah, blah. I got commissioned to write that. So I wrote that. And remember, at the time, these aren't big numbers, but these are significantly higher numbers than I had been offered, like in the past. Yeah. So even though I didn't have an investor at the time to make a movie or whatever else, I was encouraged by the fact that things were happening. That was the journey, and it was tough. There were many moments of self-doubt. There were many moments of thinking, just let this thing go. It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. And then many moments of other people telling me, dude, it's not gonna happen. I remember a really good friend. He's actually a great friend of mine in the Netherlands, and he was a Dutch guy during the pandemic. And he said to me, "Okay, are you sure this filming dream can ever happen?" I was like, I hope so. He's like, "Okay, you have to pay your rent. You walking around here, calling yourself a writer, isn't going to pay the bills, man." So there were very, very many moments of self-doubt, for sure.
There's a lot. Oh my goodness! Like, there's a lot I wanted to touch on. Like, it's something that you said, and I'm like, for people watching right now, is don't waste your pain. Right? Don't waste your pain. You said, COVID happened. There was the doubts. There was the struggle again, and you reminded yourself of things that had happened in the past, and you're like, if I could still be standing after that,
Yeah.
then this situation is not going to crush me, right? And
Exactly.
so I feel like a lot of people waste the pain from their past and not use it as a strength in their present, right? Especially the fact that even though there was lockdown, you didn't stop working.
Yeah.
That inspired the script that you were writing about, the Zoom thingy. Like, it inspired something. So don't allow the failures or obstacles define you. Why don't you use it as a hurdle? That's exactly. I think that is why I started this series. Is I wanted to show the stories of people who have been, faced with obstacles that most people would stop at, but they've turned those obstacles into their hurdles. So I know people are probably asking right now, like, okay, you're a writer. Like, how much do writers actually make, man? like how much better? Because, and I'm going to pivot after you answer that question. I want you to also answer, because you mentioned something about a movie that you wrote for and never got the credit for. I feel like a lot of writers are in that space as well, where you write an amazing script, but then the actors, the actresses, the cast get to be the face of the movie, not you. How do you deal with that?
Okay, so I'll answer that second part first. I think, writing is a very insular craft, right? You do it by yourself. I think most writers, to be honest, don't really care about being in the limelight. Yeah, because the thing about writing is that you're really, really well respected on set, and you're really well respected by your peers. So on a film set, on screen, the actors are the superstars. On the film set, the writer is the superstar. Because the actors are looking at you, because you're God, right? You're God on set. You're the guy who created everybody. You created everything.
He felt like a god on set. Like, he was the guy who was creating these characters that would enable people to shine. And my question is, are you taking the credit for the script that has been written for you, or are you giving credit to the script writer? God has written a book for everyone's life, right? And I feel like there are a lot of us who take the credit for what the script writer has done and keeps doing. Perspective and attitude is everything. I love the attitude of Kay here, because it showcases his humble disposition towards the role that he plays as a script writer. He's not interested in being in the limelight, because he's secure in his role as a scriptwriter. I'm the one who creates the stars. I may not be seen as a star myself, but I'm the creator of the stars. And this just gave me some God vibes, man. Like, that's how God is. Like, he works behind the scenes to elevate us. And then a lot of us get to the elevated spot and we're saying, we're self-made. We got here by ourselves, and we're not seeing that someone actually wrote the script that made us the winner in this story. Let's get back.
And if I sit here and I write a story about a guy who becomes a pilot, and Toby Bakri gets to play the pilot, in his mind he's thinking, this guy created the pilot that I got to play, and made me a star, whatever. So you get a lot of respect from your peers, and a lot of the magic is in creating the characters, because you have to remember, like, when you write the character is alive to you. So the moment that you write the character is already existent. He's already alive. When the rest of the world sees the character on TV, he becomes alive to them. But by that time, you've been with that character for so long that it's not really new for you. I think the magic first is on page. After you've done it, you're like, oh wow, look at these characters. That is a very, very strong drug. The feeling is incredible. And then it's also further enhanced when you see it on screen, and again when people relate to it. So as for me anyway, as a writer, that's the satisfaction. I love it. Like, I go into comment sections, I see people talking about characters that I've created, and they know their voices. And for me, that's so that for me, is not really, filmmaking isn't really glamorous. People think it's glamorous because they see the red carpet and they see the actors and stuff, but filmmaking is really grunt work. The 90 minutes that you see, or the 100 minutes that you see at the end, is just the culmination of everything, and the red carpets and all of that stuff is like, the real work is not really glamorous. And so it's fine with, in fact, I love it. I love when yeah, when actors get awards for these things, man, it's great. What was the first part of the question?
The pay, like writer's pay.
Oh, writer's pay. So that, honestly, that's a difficult question because there are different writers. There are different levels of writers. When you're a renowned writer or you're well known, and you have an agent, you have a manager, and then you're writing like on an international level, it blew my mind, I'll be honest, in terms of the fees, some of the amounts. Yeah, on that level. The first thing I wrote, I didn't get paid for. The next thing was, I sort of like edited this script, and I got paid 250,000 naira for that. And I remember thinking, wow, 250k. So this is what writers are getting paid.
Okay.
Naira. And I remember thinking, in Nigeria, I was like, the market just does not support the sort of dreams I have. And in terms of all the stuff that, I've been doing, I was thinking about making my own films, getting the investment and all that stuff. I didn't really think about writing and writers' fees as a big thing until I started seeing those fees. And I'm like, like the offers are, they're good. So I'm writing like, a few TV series now. And per episode fees are what people make per year. And
what?
Yeah, per episode fees are what people who make a decent living make per annum. And you're writing 6 to 8 episodes, and and then if you get to do that for 4 seasons, and that's one show, if you do 3 or 4, it's yeah, God is good.
You know what? That's when I see you, I feel like you are living one of the items in my bucket list, right? I've always had this idea of being behind the scenes of a Hollywood movie, because I've always been a movie enthusiast at heart. Like I love stories, right? And so, like, when I see the finished product, I'm always trying to figure out what made this. Like, I'm more interested in how the movie was made. And so when you mention, I'm doing auditions, like, that is like,
it's really fun. Yeah,
it is, to me, that's like my candy store, man. Like, it is amazing. Like, how does it feel to see something that you had in your mind become a reality? Like, that's a God moment. Like, it's like God saying, let there be light. Like, that is a God moment. Like, how, and I feel like you already hinted on this, but how does it feel to see, like, you saw I Am Mary, and then, this was an idea in your mind, Gangs of Lagos, an idea in your mind, and all of a sudden it's on the screen, people are watching it. Like, how does that feel, man?
It's incredible, honestly. It's somebody asked me, I think my niece asked me a while ago, and she was like, what's your dream? And I said, honestly, I'm living my dream, because my dream, honestly, like, forget the money, forget any of that stuff. My dream was to be able to make a living as a writer, to be able to pay rent, and to feed myself, as a writer. That was the dream. That honestly was the dream. That was the whole dream. And so that's the best part. And yeah, it's incredible, honestly. When you write it on the page, and then you have like table reads where the actors sit around the table and they go through the lines, and people are laughing and people are crying. Yeah, people are crying. I mean, with I Am Mary, in the auditions, people were crying. In the auditions, during the auditions, the actors were acting and people were crying. People watching were crying. And yeah, it's it's crazy. It's crazy. And then you talk about like Gangs of Lagos, and people watch the Gangs of Lagos and were crying at certain parts. People were crying, like when some characters died and that sort of thing. And so yeah, honestly, I don't know how else to describe it other than that it's magical. It literally is, it's magic. It's the dream for me anyway. Like to have characters recite your words, but more importantly, for people to connect to it, for people to make people feel something. I think is the entire purpose of drama, and it's just a completely magical thing for sure.
I'm going to throw you a curveball right now. I don't think you're going to see this coming. So I feel like you are one of the most eligible bachelors out there, right?
Yeah, that was a curveball for me.
And my question would be, do you think you would have still made the same decisions to pursue writing if you were married with kids?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know for sure. I do know that my conviction about the craft is so strong that I don't think very much would have stopped it. When Gangs of Lagos, for example, came out, my eldest niece is 22, and she had her friends. She invited her friends, over to have like a watch party, and that feeling is incredible to me in the sense that if I have nephews and nieces or kids who are proud of me, proud of what I do, man, I don't know if there's anything bigger, man. So I think having kids, I don't know if I'd had kids prior to this, I don't know if I would have started the journey at this time or not, but I definitely know that I would always want my kids to enjoy the experience of having a father who does this and who get to sort of experience this thing with me and be proud of the work. So I don't know, it's a difficult question to answer, but I'm glad
I know. and that, like, I feel like there are a lot of people who, and I love the answer that you gave. I feel like there are a lot of people who they focus too much on what isn't there as opposed to focusing on what is there. Right?
Yeah.
People are, you're not married right now. People are like focusing on, I need to get married. Well, like, enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
If you had gotten married, like, your story would have been a lot different, right?
Yeah.
But there's the blessing in waiting.
Yes.
There's the blessing in not committing as early as, like, everyone's story is different, man. Another curveball is, so are you looking to settle down? Or, because I can tell some babes are just watching right now and they're like, dude, oh God, when? Like, are you looking to settle down, and what is, like, I don't know, you could be in a relationship right now, I don't know, but are you looking to settle down at some point?
Yeah, I definitely want to settle down, and and it sort of sticks onto what you said, which is that sometimes there's a blessing also in having a different kind of timeline. I'm very happy about the sort of lifestyle that I have now. The fact that I'm doing well, but I also own my time, which means that if I had kids tomorrow, I'll be picking them up from school every day. My life is flexible. I sort of create everything around or design everything around my own time, and I don't think I would have had this sort of freedom 10 years ago. There's a lot of flexibility now, there's a lot of freedom, and there's a lot of opportunity to really be around and be present in a way that I don't think I would have been able to do in a traditional sort of conventional 9 to 5. So yeah, I actually feel like this is the time when I've most felt like wanted to settle down. Yeah,
I've always wondered, and I feel like because actors marry actresses, celebrities marry celebrities, I feel like I'm beginning to understand why, because not everybody is living your life. Not everybody can understand your life. So I feel like with someone like you, can you get married to someone who doesn't share that creative element? Like, I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say, but there's the way your mind works. And I feel like for you to connect with somebody, that person's mind needs to be sort of similar. Like,
I do agree. I think that creative people understand this life a little easier and a little quicker. For me, it's not really a prerequisite, but what is important to me is somebody who at least understands art and appreciates art. Because I've had conversations with people where they just think art is foolish. They're just like, what is that? That's not real. That's not a real thing. Blah blah blah. Stuff like that, would be problematic for me. But in terms of like professions, like you could be a doctor, a lawyer, whatever. But if you appreciate art, understand art, and sort of understand the artist's lifestyle, I'll be open. There is definitely a big advantage when you're with somebody who's also in the creative field, because they definitely get it,
Get
a
it,
lot
yeah.
more than other people do. But yeah,
Don't worry, we're rounding up.
all good, man.
What would success look like for you? Like, if you get to the end of your life, like what would success look like?
I would like to think at the end of my life that my work has inspired, entertained, and educated people about where I'm from, about the people who come from where I come from, and also about the world in particular. I would like to feel that people have watched these movies or read these stories and felt something, felt a connection to the world, felt some, found some sort of thematic meaning in the work that helped them, and at the same time, inspired them and entertained them.
Which one is it? Is it the Oscars or the Grammys that it's for movies? It's the Oscars, right?
Oscars. It's the Oscars, yeah.
Is that in the future?
Hey, look, God has been blowing my mind every day, man. So me, I
think I might cry. Like when I see that, because it's gonna happen.
I believe it, man. We certain things happen periodically that I think God just, for me anyway, as somebody of faith, I feel like God is just telling you that, look, I know you're going through this thing, but I see you. And because those things happened many times, even in the roughest times and toughest times, I got comfort from that. And so even now, when people talk about things like this, I'm like, look, man, I've seen a lot of signals that, God is riding. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Final question. How much has your faith played in your story?
Massively. I think, and it's weird because I thought to myself recently, while I was writing, I was like, do writers have an advantage in the faith, in the idea of faith? Because we spend so much time imagining, and I feel like faith is imagining stuff. So faith is allowing your imagination to overpower logic. Right?
Oh, this one really hit me, man, because this is literally what faith is. Spending more time imagining things to the point where your imagination begins to override your logic, which is why the Bible says the righteous shall live by faith and not by sight. I keep telling people, I'm like, if all you see is what you see, then you are blind. Which is why one of the greatest distractions, or one of the greatest weapons that the enemy will use against you, is the weapon of distraction. And he distracts you not with bad things, but with good things that are not the right thing. And so one of the critical things that I like to help people to do is to spend time in your imagination. This is why we pray. This is why we fast. This is why we meditate, because you are trying to connect with God in you, so that you can know what you were born to do and start doing it.
And and I think because I spend so much time imagining things, maybe foolishly sometimes, I think, things have just, I've just really been blessed. So I had an idea many years ago. Sorry to digress. And it was about Fela Kuti, and Fela had gone to LA in 1969, while he was trying to find his musical sound at the start of his career. And while he was there, he met this African-American woman who was a Black Panther, and they fell in love. And in those 3 months, she essentially awakened him politically, because prior to that, he was just singing, like regular, high life music. And she opened his mind. She introduced him to books like Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey, and, all this sort of like, Pan-African consciousness. And I remember thinking, I would love to write a story about that. And I was like, but imagine if I got to write it with her, with the woman, because I found out, just via Google that she was alive. And I said, what if I got to write it with her? I just imagined it. right? This is a few years ago. And so I started looking for her everywhere, and I sent her a message on Facebook, and she responded to my message, and she sent me a number. She was like, call me. Long story short, yeah, that's one of the projects that I'm working on now. She's my LA mama. I actually just saw her last month in LA. Yeah, Mama Sandra. So we're doing that. Like, we're making the film. Exactly. So I think it's I think when it comes to faith, I think because, you know, I imagine so much, and this is what I implore people to do. I'm just like, just imagine it. Like, if you want it, just think about it all the time, like obsessively. Just imagine, just keep imagining it and keep believing it, because you could trick your brain, right? You could just trick your brain by having faith. And I think sometimes we focus too much on like a religious aspect when we think about faith. Like, you're waiting for God to give you this thing that He's already sort of given you. He's already given it to you, but you haven't received it. And so faith definitely plays a massive part, for sure.
Oh my goodness, what you just said just triggered something, because I feel like for a lot of Christians, most especially, we haven't made the transition of God being with us to God being in us. It's like when we read the Bible and we study what did Jesus, when He was around, there was a certain approach, but when He left, the approach changed. And so the power is no longer outside, it's now inside. So to your point, we're waiting for God to give us something when He has already given it to us. He's waiting for us to reveal it to the world.
Exactly.
My goodness.
Exactly.
Dude, wow, this episode has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Like, I think I'm going to watch this over and over and over again. This is definitely going to inspire a lot of people, especially people who have, you know, kept their dreams and their passions in the back corner. I think, and I said it earlier, I want your story to be able to inspire someone to say it's never too late. I'm able to start now. Like, even though I'm 60, even though I'm 50, 40, like, time hasn't gone. The dream is still there. The fact that I'm still alive means that God is still waiting for me to do something with what He has given to me. Okay.
Absolutely.
It's been a pleasure, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, man. I had a great time.
Thank you so much. I told you guys this was going to be an awesome one, and I'm hoping that this episode has inspired someone to believe and to switch their mindset to not just think that the best of your life is already behind you, but to believe that the best is yet to come. To know that you can still discover your passion, convert your passion into a skill, and monetize that skill so that you can live your life getting paid to do what you were born to do and not what society has told you that you need to become. And so again, if you love this episode, definitely like and subscribe. We're just getting started. Continue to support this channel. Share it on your LinkedIn pages, your Facebook pages, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care. Bye.